Verses 22 to 25. By countenancing the persecution they raised the mob upon them. v. 22. The multitude rose up together against them, and were ready to pull them to pieces. It has been the artifice of Satan to make God's ministers and people odious to the commonalty, by representing them as dangerous men, who aimed at the destruction of the constitution and the changing of the customs, when really there has been no ground for such an imputation. By going on to an execution they further represented them as the vilest malefactors. They rent off their clothes with rage and fury, not having patience till they were taken off, in order to their being scourged. This the apostle refers to when he speaks of their being treated at Philippi, 1:2:2. The magistrates commanded that they should be whipped as vagabonds, by the lictors or beadles who attended the praetors, and carried rods with them for that purpose. This was one of those 3 times that Paul was beaten with rods, according to the Roman usage, which was not under the compassionate limitation of the number of stripes not to exceed 40, which was provided by the Jewish law. It is here said that they laid many stripes upon them, v. 23, without counting how many, because they seemed vile unto them. Do. 25:3. Now, one would think, this might have satiated their cruelty. If they must be whipped, surely they must be discharged. No, they are imprisoned, and it is probable the present purpose was to try them for their lives, and put them to death, else why should there be such care taken to prevent their escape? The judges made their commitment very strict. They charged the jailer to keep them safely, and have a very watchful eye upon them, as if they were dangerous men, that either would venture to break prison themselves or were in confederacy with those that would attempt to rescue them. Thus they endeavored to render them odious, that they might justify themselves in the base usage they had given them. The jailer made their confinement very severe, v. 24. Having received such a charge, though he might have kept them safely enough in the outer prison, yet he thrust them into the inner prison. He was sensible that the magistrates had a great indignation against these men, and were inclined to be severe with them, and therefore he thought to ingratiate himself with them, by exerting his power likewise against them to the uttermost. When magistrates are cruel, it is no wonder that the officers under them are so too. He put them into the inner prison, the dungeon, into which none were usually put but condemned malefactors, dark at noonday, damp and cold, dirty, it is likely, and every way offensive, like that into which Jeremiah was let down, J 38:6, and, as if this were not enough, he made their feet fast in the stocks. Perhaps, having heard a report of the escape of the preachers of the gospel out of prison, when the doors were fast barred, ch. 5:19, 12:9, he thought he would be wiser than other jailers had been, and therefore would effectually secure them by fastening them in the stocks, and they were not the first of God's messengers that had their feet in the stocks. Jeremiah was so treated, and publicly too, in the high gate of Benjamin, J 20:2, Joseph had his feet hurt with fetters, PS 105:18. Oh, what hard usage have God's servants met with, as in the former days, so in the latter times. Witness the Book of Martyrs, Martyrs in Queen Mary's time. We have here the designs of the persecutors of Paul and Silas baffled and broken. The persecutors designed to dishearten and discourage the preachers of the gospel, and to make them sick of the cause and weary of their work, but here we find them both hardy and heartened. They were themselves hardy, wonderfully hardy, never were poor prisoners so truly cheerful, nor so far from laying their hard usage to heart. Let us consider what their case was. The praetors among the Romans had rods carried before them, and axes bound upon them, the fasces and secures. Now they had felt the smart of the rods, the ploughters had ploughed upon their backs, and made long furrows. The many stripes they had laid upon them were very sore, and one might have expected to hear them complaining of them, of the rawness and soreness of their backs and shoulders. Yet this was not all, they had reason to fear the axes next. Their master was first scourged and then crucified, and they might expect the same. In the meantime they were in the inner prison, their feet in the stocks, which, some think, not only held them, but hurt them, and yet, at midnight, when they should have been trying, if possible, to get a little rest, they prayed and sang praises to God. They prayed together, prayed to God to support them and comfort them in their afflictions, to visit them, as he did Joseph in the prison, and to be with them, prayed that their consolations in Christ might abound, as their afflictions for him did, prayed that even their bonds and stripes might turn to the furtherance of the gospel, prayed for their persecutors, that God would forgive them and turn their hearts. This was not at an hour of prayer, but at midnight. It was not in a house of prayer, but in a dungeon, yet it was seasonable to pray, and the prayer was acceptable. As in the dark, so out of the depths, we may cry unto God. No place, no time, amiss for prayer, if the heart be lifted up to God. Those that are companions in suffering should join in prayer. Is any afflicted? Let him pray. No trouble, how grievous soever, should indispose us for prayer. They sang praises to God. They praised God, for we must in everything give thanks. We never want matter for praise, if we do not want a heart. And what should put the heart of a child of God out of tune for this duty, if a dungeon and a pair of stocks will not do it? They praised God that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name, and that they were so wonderfully supported and borne up under their sufferings, and felt divine consolations so sweet, so strong, in their souls. Nay, they not only praised God, but they sang praises to him, in some psalm, or hymn, or spiritual song, either one of David's, or some modern composition, or one of their own, as the Spirit gave them utterance. As our rule is that the afflicted should pray, and therefore, being in affliction, they prayed, so our rule is that the merry should sing psalms, James 5:13, and therefore, being merry in their affliction, merry after a godly sort, they sang psalms. This proves that the singing of psalms is a gospel ordinance, and ought to be used by all good Christians, and that it is instituted, not only for the expressing of their joys in a day of triumph, but for the balancing and relieving of their sorrows in a day of trouble. It was at midnight that they sang psalms, according to the example of the sweet psalmist of Israel, PS 119:62. At midnight will I rise to give thanks unto thee. Notice is here taken of the circumstance that the prisoners heard them. If the prisoners did not hear them pray, yet they heard them sing praises. It intimates how hearty they were in singing praises to God. They sang so loud that, though they were in the dungeon, they were heard all the prison over, nay, so loud that they woke the prisoners, for we may suppose, being at midnight, they were all asleep. We should sing psalms with all our heart. The saints are called upon to sing aloud upon their beds, PS 149:5. But gospel grace carries the matter further, and gives us an example of those that sang aloud in the prison, in the stocks. Though they knew the prisoners would hear them, yet they sang aloud, as those that were not ashamed of their master, nor of his service. Shall those that would sing psalms in their families plead, in excuse for their omission of the duty, that they are afraid their neighbors should hear them, when those that sing profane songs roar them are, and care not who hears them? The prisoners were made to hear the prison songs of Paul and Silas, that they might be prepared for the miraculous favor shown to them all for the sake of Paul and Silas, when the prison doors were thrown open. By this extraordinary comfort with which they were filled, it was published that he whom they preached was the consolation of Israel. Let the prisoners that mean to oppose him hear and tremble before him, let those that are faithful to him hear and triumph, and take of the comfort that is spoken to the prisoners of hope. Zech 9:12.